right, welcome back. You're listening to Beneath the Helmet on your favorite podcast platform, where we learn to master being an elite firefighter through mind, body, and spirit, all about self-leadership. Today, I got a chance to sit down with the founder of Block Therapy, as well as fluidisometrics.com. Deanna Hansen. I get a chance to sit down with her today as we talk about this beautiful piece of wood here that's really good for breaking up fascia, scar tissue, and just moving the body in a different way that's very powerful. I've been using this for a couple of weeks now. I started off with my rolled towel that she also shows you how to demonstrate. There's actually going to be a link down in the show notes to join her introductory program where it allows you to see maybe some of the benefits that a block buddy can have in your life. We're going to talk a lot about breathing exercises, the diaphragmatic breath work. We're going to talk a lot about how breaking up fascia, the scar tissue, the adhesions to our bones and everywhere in our body, how that really helps us as first responders show up to be our most optimal self. So this is going to be a great episode. Hope you enjoy the wisdom that she shares with us. Be sure to check out Block Buddy and pick up your own block if you want to. It is definitely making a difference in my life. So until next time, stay well.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is season 2, another amazing guest on the air today. I get Deanna Hansen here today to join me from Block Therapy. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Arjuna. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about who Deanna is and kind of your history and kind of what brought you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Fluid Isometrics and Block Therapy, and this journey began for me 25 years ago. At the time, I had already been certified as an athletic therapist for about 5 years, and my focus was always deep tissue work. And I had a very successful clientele because I had really strong hands, and I could really highlight and work through scar tissue in other people's bodies. Now, having said that, my own personal body was struggling. I was 50 pounds overweight, struggling with anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and I was doing the work. I mean, as an athletic therapist, of course, you're trained in like a whole bunch of different things, and I was putting in the effort, which I had also done long before that. But my body was not going in the right direction. It seemed like the harder that I was working, the more congested, the thicker, the bigger I got, which was completely the opposite of what my intention was. I mean, I was doing 400 sit-ups a day, running, Taebo, aerobics, weights. I mean, you name it, I was trying it. And so not only was I struggling physically and emotionally around this, that whole concept of, I'm working really hard and yet I'm failing. Like what's happening here? So I made some major changes in my life when I turned 30. And as a result of these changes, I started having really severe anxiety attacks. And this one anxiety attack was the seed of everything to come, because in that moment, I was so frozen and locked away from my breath. I was thinking I wasn't going to make it. I was really quite terrified because I couldn't catch my breath. For some reason, I intuitively dove my hand into my belly. Now, I avoided even touching this area because this was the area that I stored most of what I thought was fat. I have a different understanding about the body now, but at the time, I never touched it. So now I've got my hands in this tissue. The first thing I encountered was pain. So that was a blessing because the pain brought me out of my crazy thinking. So I'm back in my body, I'm grounded, I'm breathing. But then I started intuitively exploring with my hands in my tissue. And what was fascinating in that moment was that it was marbled with what felt like scar tissue, even though I didn't have any injury or surgery in that area. So suddenly I had all these aha moments, like, no wonder when I'm coming home from a 5-mile run, dripping wet with sweat, my belly would still feel cold. So that first evening, I spent 30, 45 minutes just working. And the most notable thing for me at that time was I was calm, which was not my normal. So I wake up the next day, a little tender from what I had done, but that sensation kept me in my body, and I just recognized how at peace I was feeling throughout the day. So I was excited to go home that next evening and do the same thing. And after I did the same, when I stood up, I felt taller. And I went and I looked at myself in the mirror, and my belly was flatter than it had looked in years. So this was just a whole new thing for me. So every night I would come home from working on patients all day, and then I would dive into my own body with my hands. And within 2 weeks, my chronic low back pain was going away. I had a whole bunch of other physical changes, but most notably for me was the emotional component of feeling calm within my body. So I started flipping my patients on their backs, started working with their bodies in a different way. And it wasn't long before I started attracting therapists to learn what I was doing, because I was getting amazing results. So that was 25 years ago, and that was fluid isometrics is the name that I actually call the technique that I've been working on myself and trained other therapists to do. And then about 10 years later, I developed block therapy, which is the self-care version of that, using a tool that we've developed for the process.
Beautiful. So what was that scar tissue feeling in your belly? What was that, scar tissue, or was that something different?
So it's adhesions basically, which act as scar tissue, and they're both made up of collagen. So scar tissue is going to happen from, of course, injury or surgery in a moment, where adhesions are going to continually form throughout the entire fascia. So we'll talk a little bit about fascia and what that is, because that's obviously relevant. So fascia is basically the cell membrane of every cell connecting every other cell. So it's the communication system between all cells in the body. It provides both stability and mobility. And it's the combination of the proteins, elastin and collagen, that primarily make up this tissue that creates both that support as well as the ability to be fluid in our bodies. And when there's a perfect balance or equilibrium of these proteins, ultimately what's happening is we have optimal space in and around every cell. And this is what's key. Space allows for ease of nutrients to be delivered and move into the cell, as well as the removal of waste and toxins from the cell. And as long as there's ease of flow, the body's happy. It's when we have challenges with flow in the body that we start seeing problems and issues. And the reality is we are under this constant force of gravity. Gravity is pulling us down as we go through time. We get shorter and wider typically as we age, but we don't just age in a linear direction. We're dominant on one side. So we're literally spiraling down one direction or another. And what's happening to this equilibrium of proteins, the collagen, which is the building blocks for the structure, it starts to migrate to areas of need. So if I'm always slouching over to the left, say sitting in front of a computer, now I have this major collapsing through here. So the collagen is going to migrate so that I don't literally tip over and land on my face. And this is, again, a very slow, continual migration of collagen. And that's what those adhesions are. But just like scar tissue, adhesions also block blood and oxygen flow to cells. So now you have cells that are starving, as well as cells that are dirty. And that is a recipe for dis-ease, chronic pain, challenges managing size and shape, emotional trauma still stuck emotionally inside the body, because it all gets locked in to the fascia. And these adhesions, which is phenomenal to even consider, will grip and adhere to everything in its path, including bone, with a 2,000 pound per square inch seal. But it's a magnetic seal. So to understand how to unlock this at the root, at the bone, is really the focus of the work that I teach.
So I know you've worked with firefighters before. Why would this technique be useful for responders, people who are under a lot of stress, tension, trauma? How could this, bring some wellness and ease to their body?
When we have control of proper diaphragmatic breathing, we can be in incredibly stressful situations, yet the inner workings of our body can be at peace, relaxed, and calm, which is necessary for healing, for rest and digest. So we want to be in parasympathetic 80% of our day. Most people are in sympathetic 100% of the day. Now, conversely, we can be in a situation where there's no stress in our immediate environment, but our inner body can be under immense stress and pressure, because if we're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, which is the fallout way to breathe, then that is going to keep our brain pattern in a stress frequency. So the thing is, can I just bring my computer down so I can just talk a little bit about the diaphragm?
Totally. Yep.
All right. So Here's the diaphragm. It's a plate of muscle that's the foundation of the rib cage. When we inhale, it moves down. When we exhale, it lifts. And if working properly, now we're getting a continual massaging of all of these organs through here. Challenge is pain, fear, and stress cause you to reactively hold the breath. Let's say I have a traumatic incident, whether physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, whatever. This is what happens. We have a trauma and we guard. And now, unlike a deer that will shake off an attempt at, getting killed, we stay in this locked version of ourselves. And then we age from that moment forward. So now here we have this plate of muscle that is now blocked and guarded. So we're still going to breathe. We're built to survive. So we're going to start breathing through the muscles of the upper chest. But the challenge is at the base of the lungs, where the majority of the oxygen receptor sites reside. So if we're breathing shallow up here, like many people do, we're not bringing the air deeply enough into the lungs for optimal absorption. And we can absorb 600% more oxygen. That's a ton breathing diaphragmatically. They've also proven 84% of weight loss comes through that proper exhalation. And it's not specifically about weight loss, but the detoxification component of that full conscious exhale that's so key. So when we can keep the understanding of how to breathe using this muscle that we were intended to use for breathing, then again, we have a very different physiology and we can keep our internal systems healthy no matter what's going on. And specifically for people like, say, a fighter who, in a moment needs to be able to run upstairs and carry people out of a burning building, you want to make sure that your cells are getting properly fed with oxygen, because the oxygen is the fuel for the ATP to give you the energy. So if we're not breathing fully and completely, that's going to decrease our ability for endurance, strength, and all of the other things that are required to be able to do jobs such as that, and anything really.
So does that affect the fascia in the body when you do deep breath, diaphragmatic breath? Does that help the fascia, or is that two separate things?
It's not two separate things. It's I think a lot of people have a different understanding of what fascia is. And literally every single cell in the body, it's fascia. So whether we're talking bone, muscle, diaphragm, that's a muscle, organ, skin, it's all comprised of fascia. So I think some people think fascia's the problem. Fascia is the container. It's like the honeycomb with the honey. Without the honeycomb, you have liquid honey. What keeps it structured is the honeycomb. So it's the fascia that keeps our cells in position. Without the understanding, again, of how to support proper fascia health, then we start collapsing and falling out of alignment. And then that affects how we can breathe, because if our body isn't aligned properly, now that core space for that diaphragm to move up and down properly in the body is compromised. And what's really important to understand when looking at fascia is, where are the cause sites to what's going on? So let's even if I could just mention like scoliosis as an example, because that's a visual. So somebody has a curvature of the spine, and many people think it's a problem of the spine. The spine is the result of the limbs pulling us in different directions. So the limbs are the puppet masters of the core. And the reason that the hands and the feet are so impactful in how the rest of our body is aligned is because they are the furthest from the engine, the diaphragm. So the fascia will grip and adhere in these areas with that most powerful seal. So if I have a frozen shoulder as an example, and I go for a shoulder treatment, and this is my posture, and this will be very much what's going on with a frozen shoulder, and I get that work done, I might feel good for the moment, but as soon as I start walking, the patterning of my feet are going to be pulling my body in that other alignment, continuing to reinforce what's causing these issues in the first place. So we need to really look at the full body and understand how everything is interconnected. Yes, we are a container with parts, but we are also a fluid matrix where everything is connected and affects everything else.
You talk about entire body alignment. What does that necessarily mean when you talk about entire body alignment?
So whenever I'm looking at a body, I always have pictures sent to me, like full body pictures. So we are like a building, and I live in a 30-story building. If there's an earthquake and my foundation shifts, everything in the building will shift because that foundation is shifted. So when I look at the feet, there's always going to be one foot that's going to be the driver and one that's going to be the anchor. Most often, it's the side that we're dominant on. So the majority of people, it's that right side. If you look at most people standing, that right foot tends to be a little more externally rotated, a little further away from the body. often has a bigger bunion, but then the opposite side has to anchor to stop us from tipping. So think of walking a 100-pound dog that's well trained by your side. You're walking, there's no tugging on your body, but suddenly you don't have a trained dog and that dog is tugging. It's the opposite side of the body that has to contract to stop us from falling flat on our face. So whenever we look at the foundation, or whenever I look at the foundation, that's first what I look at. What's driving us out of alignment? And then we know that that other side is anchoring, giving us that understanding of how that collagen is migrating away from balance to support our structure from tipping over. And so that's really the key thing is understanding how to bring the body back into balance so that everything can find its path up the chain in balance.
So it's not putting a Band-Aid on one little thing. It's really the entire body that you got to look at when you're dealing with this. Yeah.
If you want to get to the root of the issue, absolutely.
Yeah,
And that's the
yeah.
really exciting thing is we have this capacity to do so, and it's not hard. I think one of the things that's so fascinating is when we look at the body from the medical mindset, it can be overwhelming to understand because the terminology is crazy. Like if you aren't educated in medical language, now here's these big, huge, scary foreign words that can bring a lot of fear to us. So when we look at the body and understand that scar tissue and adhesions block flow, and really they're the root of the problems, and then here's the pathway to address them, then it can be a very simple process of understanding how to do that properly.
So I know you've talked about collagen a couple times, and from my little bit of experience of what collagen is, I've always thought of it as skincare or hair health. Now, that's probably the mindset of a lot of people that don't really know what collagen's for. So is there ways that you can increase collagen in your body to improve your fascia health and your overall well-being? Is there any tips there? Or?
Yeah, and I'm not personally, this is my opinion, I'm not much for taking supplements. And I think people have this mindset that we start producing less collagen as we get older, so then we need to supplement with it. My understanding and my view is different. So let's just talk a little bit about face, because as we age, this is one place where we're always looking to see what's changing with our face as we go through time. A lot of people get jowls. So let's say this is my alignment and I sit like this all the time, and most people always have their head tilted one way or another. So now gravity is affecting one side of the face differently because I'm positioned differently. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have more of a hang here, and the collagen is going to grip to the bone to try to stop the hanging from happening, to try to create changes in the body. So again, we don't tip over. But that is going to stop that blood and oxygen flow to get to the rest of the tissue. So now I have this migration of the collagen gripping to the bone, and then I have the rest of the tissue being too elastic and it starts to hang. And that's what a jowl will be. So taking supplements without changing that isn't going to change a jowl. What we need to do is we need to melt those adhesions, that collagen that have been sticky. We need to bring life back into that newly created space through the process that we teach. And then we need to also understand how to prevent continuing to fall in those negative alignments, which is what our process is all about. There's 3 parts to the process: creating space through the melting of adhesions like we teach, inflating the space through teaching proper diaphragmatic breathing, and then maintaining the space through strengthening proper postural foundation, the tongue being one of them. So just a little bit back to the diaphragm and this creating space piece, because this is really relevant. If you think of blowing up a balloon fully and completely, it's round, it glows, it almost defies gravity. When you take half that air out of the balloon, it becomes wrinkled, it becomes heavy, it sinks to the ground. So when we're breathing optimally and properly lifelong, we get to feed all of those cells fully with that oxygen, so they stay nice and light and buoyant. Yet when we aren't breathing properly over time, they start to deflate and get sticky. And then again, we're going to have those adhesions gripping as that happens. So when we start teaching people how to breathe more effectively to get that additional 6 times the amount of oxygen into the body, into the cells, then we can start plumping up those cells again. And so that's the second component, the inflating the space after we've created the space lost over time. And then again, the third one is maintaining space through proper postural foundation.
When you talk about energy blockages, or not energy blockages, you talk about flow blockages. Is that energy, or is that fluid, blood, or what is
Yes.
the actual blockage?
Yes. All of it. So
Okay.
it's energy, it's lymph, it's blood, nerve flow, all the flow.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Is there a point where you can not reverse some of these conditions? Like, is it a point where your body is so just glued together in a one big adhesion that you can't solve that? Or is it something that's 100% solvable for almost everyone?
Everyone can make progress and improve by turning on their natural healing ability and potential through proper breathing. The challenges come when we've had alterations in our structure, like if you've had a surgery. So for people say we did have scoliosis and now you have fused your spine. That doesn't mean we can't benefit you, but to be able to go back to that concept of perfection in alignment, which none of us will ever have, but that is a limiting factor. But other than that, as long as a person is willing and wants to become a conscious breather and goes through the process, we will be melting scar tissue and adhesion and improving flow. And as long as we improve flow, we're going in the other direction to what time and gravity is doing.
So, somebody who's listening right now, what are some of the things that they could start doing in their lives to improve their fascia health, improve their overall wellness, their blockages, adhesions? What are some of the things that they could start doing today?
Great exercise. And we share this. We've got lots and lots of YouTube videos on this. So because the toes are literally now the furthest from the engine, and the way that they get patterned over our lifetime, every step that we take, our toes are very impactful in directing how we move and how we walk. So taking your finger or a pencil, or have someone else do this for you, spending 3 minutes between the webbing of each toe to the point that you feel it, because adhesions are where pain is, or pain is where adhesions are. It's, two sides of the same coin kind of thing. So if you do that, and you can do it between your fingers too, this way. And again, 3 minutes is key because you can't rush melting. We are melting adhesions. We're not forcing the body. We are persuading the body. There's a difference. Force can create breakage. We are doing things very consciously with the breath and slowly. And pressure overrides pain. So as soon as you put pressure in, you start to feel those changes. And then you can go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. When you repattern between the webbing of the toes, and then you stand and grip those toes for 10 breaths, now you're pumping up the tires, because basically we have a flat tire. So think of a flat tire on your car. If it's the front right tire, everything in the car gets pulled over to that direction. So we want to pump up the tire, but first we have to release the adhesion. So that's something everybody can do right away. Same as the hands. What's really interesting is if you look at a skeleton, palms forward is how we should actually be standing at rest. But nobody stands that way. Everybody has a collapsed rib cage. There's internal rotation of the arms, and then the palms are facing the back. So even going for a walk and turning your palms forward creates a lift of the rib cage, which allows you a deeper conscious breath. And then releasing the patterning of the fingers, again, similar to the toes, and you can do it quicker because you can do both hands at once. Now, I would bring the hands down to belly button height just so that you're, not all tense up through here. But again, same thing. And then while you're doing it, you want to focus on the exhale. If we can exhale for a longer count than we inhale, then we increase the carbon dioxide in the blood, and the carbon dioxide is the currency for the oxygen. So there's a lot of people doing breath work out there, but we need to make that exhale the biggest piece, because we can be pulling oxygen in, but if there's not enough carbon dioxide, then it's not going to enter into the cell. And that's where we want it to land, is inside the cell. So that's another thing that you can do. And it should be the belly that's moving. So best to start lying on your back. You can place your hands on your belly, and then think pregnant belly with the inhale, and squeeze the belly small with the exhale. And we don't want the breath to be forceful unless we're working out or working hard. When we're relaxed, we don't want to be hearing ourselves breathing. And we also want to breathe in and out through the nose. So that one series of exercises, releasing the toes, releasing the fingers, and connecting to your breath, is so incredibly impactful. I can't tell you how many people have written into us, letting us know the changes that they have encountered just from doing those practices. And then too, just there's some postural things we can do as well. Like when we're sitting, again, we don't want to fall in, because then we have to address the adhesions that are created from that negative alignment. So when you're sitting, we should have our knees 90 degrees, and we should have our feet flat on the ground. If we grip our toes under the chair, then we're pulling and twisting our pelvis, and then that's going to affect how we breathe. It's going to pull us forward and down and create tension and pain in the upper neck and back, and so on and so on. So just
Which
some
I was just doing, just by the way.
most people do. And two, if you're on a harder chair, that's even better, because you want to feel those sit bones balanced. If you've got more pressure on one side, then we're going to have a migration of collagen more to one side. And then that's going to affect that ability for the cells to have optimal space. Another thing is the tongue. The tongue, if you notice at the roof of your mouth about a pinky nail distance from the teeth, there's a ridge. The tongue docks perfectly in that ridge. Most people's tongue is too far forward and off to one side. When I'm not conscious of where my positioning is, mine goes forward and to the right and I clench more on the left side. So I've done a lot of work to bring my tongue back into alignment. But think of holding an almond against the roof of the mouth. It's not the tip of the tongue, it's the surface of the tongue up at the roof of the mouth, which is where it should be. And there's all of this wonderful information where back in the day before we suddenly had convenience of softening food and people were having to really, really chew. They never had cavities. They didn't have crooked teeth. Where today, because, you know, we live in such a, I mean, people are drinking their fruits and vegetables now, myself included sometimes. But if we're not using these muscles properly and using the tongue to help us break down this food, which so many people don't do, then we're getting weakening in through this area and it's affecting the alignment of the face. And in fact, when people age, typically their face becomes longer and more compressed this way. So when we're doing this work, we can bring the skull structure back. We want to have room in the head for the brain. So if we start changing the size and shape of our face and our skull, that's going to also impact brain function because now you don't have optimal flow of blood into the brain as well. And one more thing, again, that's so important for the tongue, it sits above the thyroid, we have the carotid arteries, and we have the major lymphatic drainage site. So if we're sitting like this and the head's forward and compressed, all of those structures are going to be compressed with it. And there won't be that optimal flow for everything to function properly.
Imagine that it'd affect the vagus nerve too, which is one of the most powerful nerves in the body for your stress response, right? Your parasympathetic, sympathetic. Yeah.
As does the exhale. When you focus more on that exhale, it turns on the vagus nerve. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a preferred breathing technique that you do? Is there something that is your go-to?
Well, I'm always teaching people when they're lying on the tool. So if I can just show the tool, just to give a little bit of an understanding how I teach people how to breathe. So this is our Bluck Buddy. It's made of elm now in Winnipeg. And we use wood because bone and wood are similar in density. So in order to melt through all of those layers of adhesion to get to the bone, if we use something that was more porous, like a fascia roller or something a little more spongy, it would get to some surface layers, but we want to go deep. We don't want to just, and we also don't move on the block. We move in the layers when we're in a position, but we're not sliding on the block. So when you're rolling on a fascia roller, for example, that's like taking a boat on the ocean. We're going deep sea diving so we can get through those layers again. So that's why the medium is made of wood, and it's also shaped very specifically, rounded, nice corners to be comfortable in a lot of those softer areas of the body. So the first position that we always teach people, no matter what the class, is you lie on the tool. You have the block on the belly button. So I'm lying on the belly button. Now I have a prop, and we instruct people to inhale into the block and then allow the block to sink nice and deeply into the core. I was a Highland dancer when I was young, and I was always told, hold your belly in. So if you're holding your belly in, now I'm not breathing through my belly. So I'm holding my belly in, and I'm breathing up here through these muscles of the upper chest. So most people are breathing backward, opposite to the way we're supposed to be breathing. So this gives you the prop. Now, having said that, some people might not be able to start there because let's say you have, well, first of all, if you're pregnant, we instruct you differently. Also, if you have hiatal hernias, for example, and it's too painful to put, or if you're just so compressed and ballooned that there's too much pain, we can start simply having you lie on your back, placing a hardcover book or the tool on the belly button and adding pressure with the hands. The most important thing is to learn where the breath should come from. And if for decades you've been chronically breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, it can take a little bit to even understand how this muscle is supposed to work because we've fallen into a different path of breath as opposed to what we should be doing.
I talked about in my book that I just learned how to breathe a couple of years ago. I honestly was that high level breather just up in the top, third of my chest. Oh, excuse me. And yeah, I just finally learned how to breathe, and what a difference in my life that has made just breathing from the stomach, from the belly, deep diaphragmatic breaths and long exhales. Game changer, game changer.
We're literally physiologically a different animal. There's a book called by Stephen Cope, Yoga and the Quest for the True Self. And in it, one of his chapters, he goes on to the differences in physiology of the chest breather compared to the diaphragmatic breather. There's also James Nestor's book, Breath, which is fabulous. I think everybody should read it because all of the concepts that we're teaching, he goes through. Nose breathing, focusing on the exhale for that carbon dioxide exchange. Like, it's just a fabulous book, and you really, really gain a deeper understanding also of why this is so important. So this is the work that we teach. But what is also really unique with what we do, because again, if I've been positioned this way for decades, now I'm literally glued and adhered here, and I have a frozen diaphragm, so I can't shift that unless we release these adhesions. So we also work through the rib cage as a starting first class, always to melt those adhesions so that you can access more of the diaphragm. Then you pump more oxygen in, you start becoming lighter, and then it's a process of that going forward.
Going back to the breath and the tongue exercise and the tongue health and the jaw health, I'm assuming that would be very beneficial to the people who are listening right now about sleep apnea, snoring, all those kind of things that are very common in our population. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, it was years ago and I've got a community on Facebook called Block Therapy Community, and you can actually just go into the search bar and find this post. It was from years ago, but this one woman within 3 months of doing block therapy got off her CPAP machine.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's the nice thing too, like you start to see those changes immediately. And also, whatever is drawing you into this work, the changes never stop, which is also very exciting. Like, it's really profound, because what we're basically doing is we're taking the patterning of the fascia, which is also tied to the patterning of the brain. Everything is connected, and we are creating a restructuring. So your brain restructures, your whole body moves differently, and your brain patterns change. So now you can perceive things from a different lens. I also have a concussion protocol, and in my membership, we also work on the eyes. We decompress the eyes. This is really important. Think you've had an impact, whether a car accident or some kind of an impact. Your whole body gets jolted. The eyes get jolted as well. And if they don't get repositioned afterward, then now we're seeing through the lens of that. So to be able to really see again that fascia innervates every cell, and then have a process to address all of it, again, you change all aspects of life, which is very exciting.
Oh, love it. Human body is amazing.
It really is.
I know a lot of people struggle with having that self introspection about how their body is, and just sitting with themselves and understanding what their body's doing and what they're feeling, actually putting a name to how they feel. Any suggestions or tips to the listener today on how to be a little bit more embodied?
Well, and again, it's the process, and we have a gift for our listeners so that they can dive in right away using a rolled up towel, which, by the way, is very effective as well. So everybody can start, but that's the thing. When you slow your body down with your breath and you get out of your head, this is also a meditation, because meditation is basically focused attention while increasing awareness. So when you're moving into your body on purpose, with the purpose of connecting to your pain that's deeper than what you're consciously aware of, combined with the breath, then you're in that space of meditation. And that allows your brain to take that moment to pause. And then that's when the magic happens, because our brain just needs to stop, right? Like we're so caught up in those past, whether they're big traumas, little traumas. I mean, you might have had a sibling that was, maybe it was just playful, but like, oh, you're not as good as me, or, you're too this or you're too that. Like those little prompts that continue, especially if it's through our formative years, can really impact how we see ourselves and view us in this world. So when we start again to repattern the breath, now you're repatterning the mind. So just the act of starting, you're going to begin to see the changes in yourself. You're going to feel the changes, and then you're going to realize that all of these limiting beliefs, that's all they are. something that was planted as a seed in the past. And here you have a process and an opportunity to work through them. I apologize if I keep mentioning my membership, but that's where I have all these specific programs. I actually have a 90-day trauma program in there. And what's really cool about that program is I also interviewed 12 other trauma experts that gave additional tools and techniques that you can also add in, whether it's tapping, whether it's TRE. There was a whole bunch of different things, but the combination of melting through the adhesions and getting to your breath combined with other forms of energy add-ins, then you can really help to move that stuck old patterning out of your body very efficiently and in a kind way, so that you can, again, take those steps forward in your life, feeling more empowered and embodied and more grounded. And then it changes how you perceive things. So it's really, again, getting to that breath. Because also, and it was Greg Braden, no, sorry, not Greg Braden. It was Eckhart Tolle in his book, The Power of Now, that mentions when we are breathing diaphragmatically, we're in the moment. And that's connecting us to a relaxed brain frequency. When you are breathing through the upper chest, it's connecting to fear of past and future. So again, if you're an upper chest breather, you're caught in the loops of fear. So just by changing the way that you breathe will change how you view the world, how you see yourself, as well as bring you into that greater space of peace and calm.
Such a simple thing, really, right? Breathing.
Yeah.
It is a very simple thing. It's hard to maybe rewire ourselves after we've gone through decades of breathing in one way. But in the essence of breathing, it's a very simple medicine, essentially, right?
And we want to be the baby, like the baby comes out, like there's nothing restricting the child, right? Like you can take the leg, you can put it right behind the head because there's no adhesions or scar tissue blocking that range of motion. What's actually one of my biggest missions now is to get to the kids, because I'm 55. So, my generation, my mother didn't grow up in front of computers. I didn't grow up in front of computers even. The mothers of the kids today grew up in front of technology. So they are more compressed. Their breath is already more stressed when they're having the baby. So now the baby is breathing the mother's breath when they come into this world. So now they're already in a more stressed state. And my generation, again, I would say that 99.9% of all kids were breathing through the belly. And then over time, we start to shift and breathe through those muscles of the upper chest. Now I'm seeing babies coming out breathing in that space. There's a technique that we've developed, though, to change that for people, which is very exciting. But yeah, like that's really the thing. It's understanding how simple it is, yet because of those adhesions locking us away, we need a solution to get to those adhesions, which is what fascia decompression is about.
Can you go back and tell us a little bit about that towel exercise? Is that something that somebody could practice on themselves, or how does that work?
Yeah, so basically, we'll give you the link so people can download this whole thing. There's 9 videos, and it's the first class really is, you lying on the towel on the belly button. We show you how to roll it up just so that it's nice and dense. That's the key. But then the second class, now we're working belly and these lower ribs so that we can also create some heat and energy here, so we have more of a lift. And then we teach you how to work that breath more strongly. Then we get into the legs, we get into the arms, and even into the face. We talk about rooting so that we can actually own proper lower body alignment. So again, we can do that seated, but we can also understand how to do it standing. And we also talk about the tongue and strengthening the tongue as well. One of the things about standing that's really important is, I would say again, like the majority of all people stand hyperextended at their knees. So as soon as we lock the knees, there's going to be a twist in the pelvis. And now we're asking our body weight to be supported by the ligaments of the joints, as opposed to these very powerful, strong muscles that we have. So things like cellulite, varicose veins, like all of those more aesthetic components of the body, if we don't change that, knee fat, I mean, it's not knee fat, it's actually displaced fascia, but people have a different understanding of what's going on in the body because of the appearance component. Just changing how you stand, standing with your feet under your hip joints, and your hips aren't out here, they're inside your pelvis with your knees slightly bent, even like just bouncing like a little bit. If you're standing, watching TV or something, or waiting, just bounce a little bit, just to give those muscles the acknowledgement that it's the muscles that are supposed to hold us up. As soon as we lock, and I call it the lock and talk because we forget to be in our bodies when we're communicating. As soon as we lock, we twist, and then again, we're not using our muscles. And then the fascia is going to be gripping and adhering, which is going to be what's going to create all of the problems, because it's the adhesions that are really the monster for health.
And I've always been under the impression too that when you lock your knees, it's kind of sending a signal to your brain that you're in that fight or flight. You're in a bit of a stress response because you're ready for that action. If your knees are softer, your body's more relaxed and your mind and your nervous system is more relaxed too. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that several times, and it makes sense. If you're locked and kind of guarded, you're kind of in that fight or flight body posture, right?
Yeah, well, you will be, because also that will affect your ability for your diaphragm to function properly. It will collapse forward, and that's going to push the adrenal glands too far to the back of the body. So they're not getting the energy that they need to support us when we really do need to have that, additional adrenaline getting pumped out. It's basically getting pumped out all the time now, just because we're in that stance. So the body is recognizing from our posture that we're not in a relaxed position.
You brought the cellulite there. I've heard this as well, and I'd love to hear your thought on it. Cellulite, honestly, is just fascia that's all kind of knotted up. Is that right?
100%. And
Wow.
again, energy, this is a fascinating component too. Energy moves in waves and spirals, the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence is the architecture of everything in nature. Our bodies form that way. Our bodies age that way. It's the spiral pattern of the galaxies. It's the Nautilus seashells. There's no straight lines in nature. So if I'm perfectly aligned again, then I don't have to have my fascia twisting and gripping and adhering. But as soon as I start tipping off balance, those grips are going to do this on the bone. And that's exactly what's happening. We're seeing these dimples, but it's because of the way the energy is traveling, as the adhesions have to grip on the bone to stop us from tipping over. So it's not just about melting those adhesions off, because again, if I keep falling into that same alignment, they're going to keep becoming reinforced. It's the process of melting them, then breathing into them to inflate those cells, and then understanding how to support correct alignment so we don't continue falling into those negative spaces.
Said the human body blows my mind every day.
Me too.
So for somebody who's listening right now, what are some of the first steps they could do to start working with your technology, your system? What are some of the things that they could? Is there an online program, or how does this work for them to start working on their own fascia in their own body?
Yeah, so the first thing is, utilize the gift. With the towel, again, you're really going to get it. You're going to feel what the process is about. The teaching is the same, just the tools, or it's a free tool. Everyone's got a towel. We teach you how to roll it up so it's nice and dense. Start there. And then if that speaks to you, you'll be prompted to go to those next steps. But I do have a website, blocktherapy.com, where we have tons and tons of information. We have a store showing you a bunch of different things. And then I would encourage anybody that's on Facebook to go to Block Therapy Community on Facebook. I've got over 16,000 members in there. And what I love about that place is, for example, I haven't had MS. So I can't personally speak to MS. I can speak about how the system works for people with MS. But if you ask, you're going to have people with any and all of the conditions that are relevant answering also. So you're going to have the wisdom of the people using it for different situations that they are dealing with, and then sharing their experience, which is just the most beautiful space. I also, once a month, I go on live calls for anybody and everybody that has questions. So, and I've got a beautiful community of people that always show up to also offer that additional support. And that's really the thing. It's all about community, especially when dealing with trauma. Community is so key and important, because you have other people that have walked before you on this path that can give you those insights, especially when those fears come up. So highly recommend anybody that's interested to go there.
You circling right back to the very beginning, you talked about pressing into your belly and feeling those knots. Was that anything to do with the psoas muscle, or was that strictly just fascia that you were feeling, or that pressure, that tension, and that pain that you're feeling?
Well,
Because I know from like TRE and stuff like that, the psoas muscle is a very powerful muscle that stores trauma and emotion. And it's usually a very tough muscle to actually work on most of the time.
Yeah, because it's so deep. So initially when my hand was going in there, I had so much inflammation in my belly. I don't think I even came close to touching the psoas. Although we do have a whole bunch of classes for the psoas in our work, our membership. And the thing is, because the psoas connects the upper and the lower body together, again, that really ties in what we were talking about, how to look at the body as a whole. Because if I have an issue with my right psoas, it's tighter, what's driving that? And if I just try to work just on the core, again, the limbs are the puppet masters of the core, I'm not going to get any more than an in the moment relief, because those limbs are going to keep pulling us back. And then of course, so the psoas, just for the listeners, the deepest muscle surrounding the lumbar vertebrae. So if I'm twisted like this, now this psoas here is getting twisted and this one is responding to that twist, but that's going to be driven by what's going on in my legs. And then that's going to, because it also connects to the diaphragm, pull the upper body forward and down and create a huge amount of compression and congestion in the abdominal space. So then, because also that's going to affect our ability to eliminate efficiently, now I have a backup of waste. Now I'm going to attract parasites, other things. They create waste. So then the core of the body just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger because of that. So many people think that, oh, I'm over 40 now, I haven't changed anything, but now I'm getting a muffin top. I have more accumulated fat. It's not fat. It's displacement, ballooning, compression, ballooning, and then the toxicity that results from that lack of flow that also adds more to the ballooning.
Just looking at me on this screen, what's the first thing that popped into your mind looking at my face and my body? Anything you can read from that in regards to fascia?
Yeah, your shoulders are a little bit rounded.
Yep.
And then you've got a little bit of additional tissue here. That's the tongue, though. Like a lot of people think double chin. It's not a double chin, it's a tongue. The lines now, this is something that's really interesting, because when we look at younger people now, you can see these lines in the neck happening at a way younger age, because again, they're doing this, right? So now we've got collagen migration to try to stop the head from tipping forward this way. You're not overly like, some people are very like, asymmetrical in their posture. You're actually pretty good. Your left shoulder is dropped a little more than your right one, but not bad at all. But again, that would translate to what's going on down the chain. And also the hands. Those are key, because again, if we've got, that internal rotation of the arms because of the collapse of the rib cage, that's going to draw the hands to face the other direction, and that's going to keep holding in those alignments. So to be able to release all of that and bring the rib cage up and nice and tall, that's a big thing that will help.
Very cool. So what's one thing I have not asked you that you wish I asked you? Anything that's popping in your mind?
I think the biggest message that I really, really love for people to know is that you actually are your own self-care advocate when you finally understand how to learn the language of the cell. So pain is not our enemy. Pain is the baby crying. Pain is the cell giving you a signal. And when we mask it or posturally avoid it, it's going to get louder. Just if you ignore that baby, it's going to get louder. But if you ignore that baby too long, that baby might die. And that's when we get in trouble in our body, when we ignore those signals too long, and then they're so blocked from life, they're hibernating. I think some people are literally accessing maybe 10% of their cells because they're so frozen and their breath is so shallow that the body's built to survive, but it's also built to thrive. And, when it comes to survival, the body knows how to direct the energy to the organs that are required for survival. But for us to thrive, the cell in the pinky toe is as important as the cell in the heart. So if we want to thrive, we can have that capacity to do so by supporting the fascia from head to toe, by turning on this very powerful mechanism, the diaphragm, and by knowing, my tagline is breathe and believe, because it's incredible. Again, where I don't think I'd be alive today, to be honest, if I had not channeled this to share, because I was in such a negative state in my own life. And if I didn't have something to really turn that around, I was on a path of destruction. So no matter where you're starting from, you can be, I have people starting in their 90s, people that can't get out of bed. You do this lying down, you can do it in bed. All ages, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're beginning. When you start to understand how to tap into this beautiful, powerful mechanism of your own body, positive change starts to happen. Now, having said that, healing crises are real, because when we start disrupting the old pattern, the garbage has to come up and out somehow, and we're going to feel that. So it's different for everyone. There's some very common scenarios that are happening, like some, and it also, I mean, for some people it can happen right away. Some people it's a year later, months later, whatever, right? Like it's, you can't predict when your healing crisis is going to happen, but basically that's your body rest. So your body can do its job of pushing out the old. So it might be mucus production. It might be diarrhea. It might be a change in pain. It may be a skin rash. You might feel fatigued. You might be having emotional responses that don't make sense. Like suddenly you're just waking up and you're angry. It's like, okay, you've had this anger locked in and now it's coming up so that you can actually deal with it and exhale it out. But it's not judging. It's so beautiful because it just happens, and it's a letting go. And on the other side of it, you have more space for health, for life, for creativity. I truly believe we're all put here with a purpose to do something to improve the quality of where we're at, to increase the vibration of those around us. And when we get rid of this heaviness, this burden of toxins and adhesions that are trapping us in this traffic jam of a body, then we can have that space to not just try to figure out how to manage to get through a day. We can get excited about these days again and then do something that is beneficial to those around us.
What's in your day-to-day self-care plan? What do you do every single day to make sure that you're the best Deanna possible?
I wake up with my block. So
Nice.
first thing I do, I wake up, and before I'm even really fully conscious, I'll just grab it and I'll put it under something. I'll have it under my rib cage or my belly or whatever. I love those vibration plates. That's a wonderful way to get the lymph going. So I'm like it, I'm in Winnipeg, and it can be, minus 35 Celsius in the winter. So I'm not going to go walking outside when it's minus 35. So to have that ability to move is lovely. I eat clean. I'm vegetarian, but I'm not overly specific, and I'm certainly no expert on, sharing diet stuff, but I make a point of eating clean and also drinking really good spring water. I know there's a whole lot of different things out there regarding water, and I structure water. Structuring water is really helpful. There's a tool called an analemma, ANALEMMA. You can Google that. And then it's just this little crystal wand, and you put it in your water, and you just do that, and you structure the water so that it's more valuable to the body. So there's a lot of those little things that I love to do, but really it's getting myself grounded with my breath when I wake up.
What do you need a little bit more in your life to bring you to that next level of wellness?
That's a great question, actually. Had you asked me a year ago, I would have said time, but I think I've figured that out now. I have 30 people on my team now. So I have an incredible team. I have an absolutely beautiful community. So I really do feel like I'm being showered with love and gratitude and appreciation. And I get to do what makes my heart feel full and, share with as many people as I can. So I feel very calm and content in my life, actually, which I have to say is kind of new. When this whole thing began for me years ago, it was very magical because I was unlocking things that I was learning about in real time on my body. But then it was like, okay, if you want to get this out to the world, now you got to deal with business. So that was stressful for about a decade, but now I feel like I'm on the other side a little bit. I mean, there will always be challenges, but when you have an amazing team and you have a community that are so supportive and strong, then it's like, there's always people, there's always answers, and there's always solutions. So I don't actually see the world through the lens of I have problems anymore. I see it more, there's situations and there will be solutions on the other side of that. So sleep is a key thing, of course. I've also gotten into better habits with sleep. I make sure that I'm not watching TV until I want to go to sleep. I give myself time between any kind of phone or whatever so that my brain can stop and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I think I'm doing okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, honor to connect with you. We have a fellow fire chief who's our mutual friend, and that's how we got connected. And I feel very blessed that we made that connection and had a chance to talk to you today. So
Me
Thanks
too.
for sharing your wisdom.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for putting the block out there and your system of flow into the world. And for anyone who's listening right now, would love to check it out. Check out the website. Check out the towel exercise that she's gifted us. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this amazing episode. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.